So I got kicked out of the guild, and I'm gonna explain what happened. You're gonna want to hear the rest of this story. So basically, yesterday, and I'll be posting clips of everything that happened, I was complaining about the fact that we don't have a 20-man raid roster for Mythic Raid Team. So we push Heroic, we kill Heroic bosses, and then we slim down to a 20-man team based on if people want to leave or if people want to run. And if there's more than 20 people that want to run Mythic, they bench people, basically. And I'm just surprised that there wasn't a 20-man roster. All I was talking about on stream was how a 20-man roster would be more beneficial because it creates better cohesion, better cooperation, better coherency between the teams. The people who play the same roles can work together, make each other better, learn mechanics better, go off of each other's cooldowns, all those type of things if you have an established 20-man raid roster team. Nothing that Mythic teams are not unfamiliar with, right? But I also was reaching out to Apex, which is the 9 of 9 Mythic Raid team guild on our server, because if we want to push Mythic and I'm not happy in my current guild, I was like, well, let's reach out to the other guild that's running Mythics and see what their situation is, right? So before Raid started, I reached out to MTS Savage on Warson saying, hey, I know that you're one of the people that are in charge of the guild. You're the officers of this guild. You guys run raids on Mythic difficulty. What's your guys' roster looking like, and how can one earn a spot? He basically just responded very coldly, like, we aren't accepting applications at this time. And I said, okay, no worries. That's fine, I guess. I'm currently on an MLG, just looking for other options. Thought I would check our server before I look elsewhere, right? Totally fine with server hopping to be able to Mythic Raid. That's not a problem. He then goes, try Booty Bay Swim Team, which is the third and only other Mythic Raid team. There's only 3 on Warson's battle group. And that's fine. I'll reach out to them as well if I need to. But at this point, I'm probably going to server hop because the server's crazy. So that's the end of that conversation. We hop into Raid and we start bashing our head against Agara. You guys saw stream yesterday. It basically was 20 attempts with moderate success. The final time getting to like 15% before we called Raid, even though we probably could have killed the boss if we kept going. I think Raid League was just pissed off at whatever happened with me and just wanted to be done raiding. It really seemed like his attitude changed. So what ended up happening was at some point during the raid, pretty much an hour in, I start complaining about the fact that there's not a 20-man raid roster. I've got the exact clip. I'm going to play it now. I'm worried this will be like the last time we Mythic Raid. This guild's very particular about not having walls where we like try 100 times to kill a boss, which is really the point of Mythic raiding. So I think this will be like a good like eye opener to the raid team. Is like, oh, we're not gonna Mythic raid, which is the biggest waste of time in my life because we could Mythic raid, we could do really really well if we establish an official 20-man roster raid team with specific range DPS roles, melee DPS roles, healer roles, and tank roles, and then those people can switch to the classes that they need to, like, you know, normal Mythic raid team shit. But for some reason, this guild is like weird first come first serve, bring whatever character is able to run shit, and it just blows my mind that that's what we do. So none of them actually want a Mythic raid. They don't set up anything to be good at Mythic raiding. We're just hoping it works out, and it's just not how I do things. So none of that seems unreasonable, right? Like, in my brain, it's totally fine to think like, hey, we should have a 20-man raid roster if we're going into Mythic. It's a 20-man specific raid instance, 20-man roster, 5 people, like, as supplementary people if people can't make it. And then anytime you run Heroic, anyone else in the guild is welcome to come because that's how all guilds that raid, pretty much in my experience, are established. If that's too much to ask for nowadays, I have no idea how raid leading or guild leading is anymore because I've not raid led or guild led since Shadowlands, and I can't imagine it being that much different in the course of one expansion. But both of the guilds on Warson do this weird no roster guild setup for some reason. Anyways, After that, there's a person in my chat named Zillion Bucks that responds and goes, he says this exact message.
Sure. There we go.
Do one more, so we can clear our heads.
At which point I respond,
Take a break.
I'm just saying there needs to be a roster. I don't know how there's not a Mythic Raid roster team. That's all. How is there not a 20-man roster team? I feel like that's so easy to do.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the Warcraft to stop.
I'm fine with just running Heroic, but if you want to do Mythic, you know, I've got other things I could be doing right now.
Should have plenty.
I'm with, I mean, there's a pretty good majority of people that don't want to bash their head against a wall. And if we're not going to set up Mythic Raid, like, really, really well, it's just bashing our head against the wall. That's all it is. And I'm like, how is casual ahead of the curve? Heroic raid team a sentence. That doesn't make sense. Casual guilds that raid don't kill heroic bosses. They kill normal bosses. That's what a casual guild does. Casual means all you're doing is getting on occasionally. You're not progressing any type of endgame content to the extent to where you're only focusing on it. You're not pushing Mythic Plus to get the best gear in the game so you can absolutely destroy bosses. You're just getting on. You're challenging yourself with some normal difficulty stuff. If you get into heroics, you get into heroics, but really the goal is a normal raid clear. That's a casual guild. A raiding guild clears heroic raid bosses, right? My tier is casual, heroic, and mythic. If you're a heroic raiding gear team, you're a raiding guild. Your whole specific guild motif is to kill heroic raid bosses within the time limit of a season, so that way you get ahead of the curve, and you try to push and get as much done in the heroic raid as you can. Now, a mythic raid team is a guild that has a 20-man roster that specifically designs the roster so that way they can successfully kill mythic raid bosses. And if people need to switch classes or races or min-max, or you need to boost a character to be able to get this specific buff that you need to be able to kill this boss, all of the little minutia, tiny, minute roster change things that you generally do, you have to do to be able to kill mythic. It's just that much more difficult. Now, again, I've talked about how, like, the baseline difficulty for what I think Blizzard wants their raid teams to be doing is heroic, and mythic is that step ahead and above the Call of Duty. So heroic raid teams are perfectly acceptable. I would be very satisfied with a normal, like, 13-man, 14-man rostered heroic raid team. I don't think there'd be any problem with that. I would be getting what I want out of the game, and I'd be able to create content on it. As long as I get to see the story and achieve the difficulty that I think Blizzard is trying to put out, which is heroic in my opinion, then we'd be able to do that, and that's fine. Now, if we try to do mythics, and you're just not dedicating a specific amount of people to do that, you're just going in hoping that the people are good enough to be able to kill the bosses with very little organization. Now, the raid leader on MLG is phenomenal. He's probably the best raid leader I've ever worked with. Generally, whenever I'm on a raid team that I'm not raid leading myself, because I've only ever been on like 5 or 6 that I wasn't raid lead myself, I feel motivated to just become raid lead from the guild, because generally the raid leaders never put in enough effort or do anything that helps actually kill bosses, where the raid lead on their team, Eldon, is like actually very, very well versed in game mechanics and class mechanics. He understands what positioning needs to be done, and he comes up with pretty good ideas on how to kill bosses. Never had any problems with Eldon at all, except for the loot council thing that they do, where it feels like they ninja and basically gate hold all of the gear for the people that they want to get gear from. They only let you need once. I'm not going to get into the loot, because that never really bothered me, but it was really weird. But we do end up getting into it at the end of this video, so stick around. So there's that. But basically, I got kicked from a guild because of this conversation. So I'm talking about the 20-man roster on stream. The guy that I whispered about joining their mythic raid team hopped into my stream and then told my raid leader that I was talking shit on the guild when I really wasn't. I was just complaining on the fact that we don't have a 20-man raid roster. And if complaining about not having a roster gets you kicked out of a guild now, that's impressive. So Eldon, during the break, after this conversation with Zillion Bucks, who is MST Savage on fucking Apex, after that conversation, we go on break, and Eldon starts whispering me, and he says, let's see if we get this boss down. Change that real fast.
Just using the scroll of summoning.
I basically covered the chat because I didn't want chat to see I was giving Eldon his privacy. I tend to do that if there's whispers involved or guild chats talking about stuff. I'll cover chat with my webcam because I don't want them to be getting nervous or pressured that people are watching their conversation. So he messages me and he's like, hey, so someone says that you're talking badly about the guild, and if you've got problems with how things are set up, then please, like, ask us or talk to us about it. There's things that we can do, but, like, you know, what's going on, basically. And I messaged him as all like, not really talking shit, just complaining about the fact that there's not a 20-man roster. I think it's crazy we're trying to do Mythics without an established raid team. And he goes, there's about 30 people that like to raid, so we don't have like a roster. If people want to come, they can come. If people don't want to come, they don't have to come. And I'm like, that's no problem, no big deal. You do whatever you want to do, man. I'm chilling. And he goes, word for word, because I don't want to misquote him. I'm kind of definitely paraphrasing, but I don't want to give him any sort of bad cred either to the situation, because he handled it the best way he thought possible based off of the information I'm sure he was given. I don't think he was watching stream or heard me talking. I think this other guy just kind of was a worm in his ear and told him I was saying a bunch of other shit even though I wasn't. And actually, I was praising the guild pretty much half the time in the raid. I always have been. I talk massively, very complimentary about the raid leader himself, about the DPS and how powerful they are, how the healers just absolutely dominate. It's one of the best guilds I've ever been on from a raiding perspective. Those players could be the best raiders on the server if they had better organization, and that's all I was talking about. So he ended up mentioning like we are a casual semi-hardcore guild. Casual semi-hardcore guild. And I said, bro, that's a paradox. You can't be casual semi-hardcore. And he goes, we are casual players that sometimes push hardcore content. And I was like, dude, that's totally fine. You know, that doesn't really make sense. I'm letting you know that doesn't really make sense. But you do whatever you want to do, or you label yourself however you want to label yourself. And he goes, you're being really defensive for a new person. And I said, you messaged me. Like, I didn't bring this up in guild. I didn't bring this up in raid chat. I'm just talking to my chat, freedom of speech, doing what I do. I'm allowed to complain about specific things. There's nothing that other people aren't doing. They're just not broadcasting it to the internet. And I really wasn't even complaining. I think having a 20-man roster on a raid team is fun and cool. You earn your spot. You pay for your keep. You know what I mean? Like you commitment. You are now tied to this system, and that creates foundations where friendships and families can be born and built. And like, there's nothing wrong with asking for some stability. Apparently there was. So after that, break ended, and you could immediately hear there was a tone switch in Eldon's calls for the rest of the night. I can put some clips up now.
Groups. Heal absorbs. Very soon.
Give in to agony.
Early spears.
Dodge balls, dodge balls. Lots of balls. I got 2 debuffs, healers, 3. Spears.
Nourishes me.
Nice. You could tell he definitely was a bit more sharp edge, a little bit more on obtruse. We get pretty good progression down on Ingress. I think we get him down to about 15% on one of the polls. We've got like 30 minutes left on raid, and he just decides to call it, says we're done hitting our head against this wall, even though there really was good progression. Like, we were getting 10% chunks per time. He just, in my opinion, it came down to, I think false information was given to Eldon. For some reason, leading up to this point, they were already really upset with me. Prior to this situation, one of the first 2 weeks I was there, I got a message from one of their officers saying, I talk too much. I can actually pull up that message directly. I still have it. I'm not going to actually like pull it up, but I'll read it. He says, hey, just giving you a heads. Some raid members have had the following concerns. Talking a lot, it becomes a bit distracting, and some when they're hearing two different ways. Doing raid callouts, we have a raid leader. So again, with my raid lead experience, there was definitely certain times when I would key up and go, hey, there's an ad to our left, let's clear it. Or soak in the back. You know, like little things, like people weren't necessarily noticing things. No one was making a call, and I'm just doing a shout out to make sure that things get covered, right? Apparently, people didn't like that. In my opinion, Eldon didn't like that. For whatever reason. Maybe he felt threatened because of how well I was doing. Who knows? I understand you are new trying to help out, and that's fine. Our guild has been extremely successful in how to get things done. We are addressing things early before it becomes problematic. We do have a raid lead, Eldar, or myself. Both have been proven to be able and capable leaders. Recommendation, reduce the amount of talking. No talking during encounters unless directed by the current raid leader. Any questions, comments, or concerns? By all means, this is not meant to be harsh or mean. If you want to talk about it, let me know. I said, no worries. That's literally all I said. Since then, I've been muted in Discord. I've never said a word outside of people responding to me directly and me responding to them. Like, hey, Red, what are you doing? Are you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. Or, hey, Red, why'd you die? And I'll give a quick little explanation of it or whatever. But, like, most of the time, I don't say a word in raid chat anymore, right? So since that concern, it feels like I was always on the outside. And I hate being in a guild that is, like, that insecure about that and that raid team, but it was fine. I didn't mind it because we were killing bosses, so I just dealt with being basically muzzled to the point to where I thought what I was doing was fun, and everyone seemed to be laughing when I was making jokes or doing things, but like the raid callouts, you don't want people making specific like, hey, go soak this stuff. That's fine. I can understand that. I know from a raid lead when people used to give callouts, it made me feel insuperior, and I just felt like I wasn't doing my job. And our officers were designed to help me with that. No one else was. So we had that situation too. I understand where he's coming from. I took the L on that, muted myself in chat, and we ran for another like month. Almost like 3 weeks or whatever it was. The next thing that happened, I log on this morning to see a message from someone on Discord, I'm assuming Eldar. And it goes, the officers and I have had a discussion and we are going to be removing you from the guild team. He says, we have a 3-strike system and you've crossed all 3 strikes. From the first time of over-talking or talking too much, being too communicative, to disrupting and talking abruptly and badly on the guild online, and then the third time to whispering people and making them uncomfortable. I can only imagine that third strike was Eladar whispering me and then me not just bending the knee to whatever he says. Me being defensive, even though I wasn't. I was just bringing up a point. And the first part, like, with that's super confusing, is he whispered me first and asked me, hey, is there anything going on? Is there things about the guild that you don't like? Just talk to us, communicate to us. What seems to be the issue? And I said, I'm just concerned there's not a 20-man raid roster. That's literally all I did, man. And for some reason, that was enough to get completely obliterated out of MLG. Most insecure raid team I've ever seen. Now, I could talk a lot of shit about how they do their loot, how I ran 3 weeks without getting a single piece of loot, how 85% of the gear on my hunter is strictly from the Vault or Mythic Plus and not from raids. Basically what they do for their loot system, which I think is even more atrocious. Now that I'm not in the guild and I'm free to talk about whatever the fuck I want, RC Loot Council, in my opinion, is designed as an add-on to allow you to gear up the people that need the gear the most. You basically get to see their exact gear score, item level, their stat preferences, all of that can be input into the add-on itself. And then once the loot gets rolled, you can see, oh, Red is a 25% upgrade towards his best in slot versus this hunter, which is a 5% upgrade towards their best in slot. And most guilds will use RC Loot Council to distribute the gear into the best position possible to give the raid team if there would be one, the best highest statistical damage increase or health output increase or defensive capabilities for tank increase, right? You don't just scapegoat the roles. So the way that they do it is they have a system where you can need on gear, you can greed on gear, and then a bunch of other like alt rolls or transmog rolls or off spec rolls or disenchant rolls, whatever they would be. They're a bunch of different rolls. Basically, in raid, you get one need a night. Basically, like, I really need this piece of gear, but you only get one. The next rolls, if you do need a piece of gear, or you could use it because it is an upgrade, is a greed roll, right? So basically, you greed roll on everything until you get to a boss that you like, I really need this gun, and then you would need roll, or I really need these bracers. You'd use your need roll, and you would hope that your RC, your hidden RC roll, which no one can see besides the officers and RC Loot Council, would be high enough to beat the other people on that roll. And if it was, you used your need roll, you don't get to do it again for the rest of the night. Now, on nights where we killed mythic raid bosses and only one boss died, or two bosses would die, you still only have one need roll for the whole night, so everyone would just need on every piece, and it doesn't make any sense. The thing that bothered me the most is there would be times where, like, oh, this is a 12% upgrade, I could really use this piece of gear, but I'm going to save my need for a trinket that I might drop later on. I felt like I was being punished for seeing loot drop because I didn't get to actually have a chance at rolling on it. You would greed roll, and then you would hope that your hidden roll was high enough. And it seemed like, in my experience, the same people were getting gear over and over and over again. Like I said, there was a whole 3-week period, I literally have the streams to prove it, of where I didn't get a single piece of loot from raid. Only because I would save my need roll for the final boss or one of the final bosses, never have the opportunity to use it on any of the pieces that I needed prior to that, lose all of my greed rolls because I guess I was just unlucky, and then the final boss would come, I would need roll, other people saved their need rolls as well, and they would get the piece of loot. Or in other worst case scenarios, something else that could happen during raid is you decide to use your need roll early on something you mediocrely need because you just are afraid of not getting a piece opportunity later for fear of not killing bosses and or just the pieces not dropping themselves. So in this example, literally the clips I have, I need on a trinket that is a tier upgrade. So if you don't know World of Warcraft loot right now, it's basically like there's different tiers and you can upgrade those pieces of gear past the item level of previous pieces. It gets complicated, but know that this was a tier upgrade. For those that know will know. It's a pretty minor upgrade. I already have this in a lower tier. This would just allow me to push the item level further if I get the right crests and the right flight stones. So I don't really need it, but I choose to use my need roll. All right, they're saying I got the trinket. And then the very next boss drops something that is a 30% upgrade for me. And I don't get to need on it. And I don't get the piece because I greed rolled it. Why do you have this system? Do you really need that belt? Way more than I needed the transmog. Or way more than I needed the trinket. I got burned by it the first time. Immediately. That's okay. We'll see if we still get it. Probably not, though. Good luck on them. I wish them the best of credit. Literally got kicked for complaining about not having a 20-man raid roster. You let me know if that was justified or not. But shout out to Mystic Lawn Gnomes on Warzone. Go give them the best of love, man. And until next time, if you're looking for one of the best hunters, 99 percentile, go ahead and hit me up. Willing to realm transfer. Thanks so much for listening to my TED Talk. Catch you guys later. Bye. So I got nothing.